Now, as South Africa's general elections edge closer, political parties are bringing their various offerings to the table to garner support. Newly formed Rise Mzansi launched its manifesto on the 20th of January and was the first political formation to do so. Think tank Africa Check has conducted a study on Rise Mzansi's manifesto. Researcher from Africa Check, Keegan Leech, joins us to discuss it. Keegan, a very good morning to you. Thank you so much for your time. I mean, with this year being all about electioneering, wooing voters, big promises will be made, some being unattainable. What is your research pointing to insofar as the big commitments and those very bold statements in an election year?
Well, a quick correction. We're not a think tank. We're a fact-checking organization. So this is the sort of stuff that we really love, and it's the sort of stuff where we feel we're most helpful, because you're not going to be able to make a well-informed decision about where to cast your vote if you don't know what information is accurate and what information about the elections and published by the parties themselves you can actually trust.
So, with the new kid on the block, Rise Mzansi launching its election manifesto last month, I mean, a number of promises and assertions were put out. The challenges around unemployment, how unemployment affects black women the most, the majority of whom live below the poverty line. How much evidence is out there?
This is actually one of the most unimpeachable claims in Rise Mzansi's manifesto. You'll see with some of the others that sometimes we can get really in the weeds, and things can be quite nuanced and complicated, but their claim that black women are more likely than other demographics to live below the poverty line is as clear as could be. Whatever definition of poverty you use, there is a very clear trend there, and black people and women in South Africa as separate groups are already more likely to live in poverty than other demographics. Black women have it worst of all.
You talk about getting in the weeds, nuanced and complicated. The World Health Organization, for one, says that disability is an integral part of the human experience. Another priority for Rise Mzansi is to ensure that people with disabilities have access to human rights afforded to all South Africans. What's the verdict around disability? Is it do more than 4 million South Africans live with a disability? Is that accurate?
Well, in a way it is accurate. More than 4 million South Africans live with a disability, but we found that was actually an understatement of the real figure. Rise Mzansi told us that that figure they had taken from a presentation by the city of Johannesburg, which used some data from 2019. We're not entirely sure what that data was describing, but the latest reliable data from Stats SA's General Household Survey tells us that at least 9.6 million people in South Africa live with a disability.
What about the claim around South Africa being the most unequal country in the world?
This is a really complicated one. It's a really classic case of data being difficult to decipher and pick apart. On the one hand, we've rated this mostly correct, because if you look at the most common measure of inequality, which is something called the Gini coefficient or Gini index, then South Africa often does rank highest out of the countries that are surveyed. So, for example, the World Bank keeps measures of inequality using the Gini coefficient, and South Africa ranks worst. But, unfortunately, there are lots of countries not represented there. So the Gulf states, for example, which by other measures have high indications of high inequality, they're not present. And there is some incompatibility issues in the surveys used to collect that data in different countries.
Yeah.
So it's accurate, but as a researcher at WITS told us, it really should be qualified by saying that this is the case for the countries for which we have data.
There were also other claims made around food insecurity. We know that millions of South Africans do not have enough food to meet their daily needs. Rise Mzansi, on the other hand, has said that there are more cases of food insecurity and hunger today than there were in 1994. Is that accurate?
This is a really interesting one, and the moment the manifesto launched, someone tagged us on Twitter to ask if it was true. We found that this is unproven. So it's not necessarily the case that this is false or true. It's just that the best available data to us doesn't indicate that this is the case. What it does suggest is that food insecurity and hunger have fallen. So, for example, StatsSA's General Household Survey, which goes back to 2002, found that vulnerability to hunger fell from about 24.2% of households to about 11.6% of households in 20 years. It's just that it doesn't go all the way back to 1994. So we can't really prove that there are fewer cases. And that gets a little bit into the weeds with the data there.
So as we enter the space, there's a lot of misinformation, disinformation, and of course people really scrutinizing manifestos of these political parties, trying to decide where to vote, whether or not the decision will be correct. What stands out for you insofar as the importance and the value of distinguishing between facts, non-facts, misinformation, disinformation?
One thing that stands out, especially around election season, is that everyone can get it wrong. There's a lot of pressure to check everything and to scrutinize everything that you see. Everyone's going to slip up at some point and share something that's incorrect, or even political parties and politicians aren't necessarily going to get things perfect, even if they are really trying. They're trying to be accurate. So there are going to be false claims out there, and you do need to be careful. We hope that we can take some of that work off of other people and some of that responsibility off of people whose job isn't to sit and read these manifestos with a careful, considered eye and really pick them apart. Yeah. So we hope that we make that a little bit easier for ordinary South Africans deciding where to cast their vote.
What is the significance of these manifestos anyway, as we are in this season of elections and, of course, people are weighing out which way to sway?
Well, manifestos tell us about what a political party's intentions are, how they see the state of South Africa, and what they see as the biggest crises. Obviously, it's not an example that we see here, but if a problem or an issue or a major component of a party's manifesto was based on false data or entirely inaccurate claims, that's a sign that they're out of touch with what the issues are in the country.
Very well. Thank you so much for that, researcher from Africa Check, Keegan Leech, giving us a sense of what the Rise Mzansi election manifesto contains, as, of course, fact-checking will be an imperative part of the election season as voters try and decide where to make their mark.